Welcome to this edition of Beat Teacher Burnout. I'm so glad that you've joined us this week. We've got Catherine Williams, who's a former teacher, with us today. Hi, Catherine. It's great to see you.
And you, Rowena.
Thanks for being here with us. We're going to look today at what it takes to look after yourself and why we don't stop and think, oh my goodness, do I need to do that for me? Or am I just going straight down a rabbit hole of chasing after everything and never stopping to look after myself? So we're going to talk about that today. So Catherine, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about you?
Hi, that's lovely. And thank you for having me today. I'm really grateful. My name's Catherine. I was a primary school teacher for 15 years. And I say was because I think once a teacher, always a teacher. I just feel like that was something that I was doing. I'm still a teacher, but just not in the classroom. I left my permanent teaching position after 12 years. I was about to have my third baby. And I felt that it was the right time for me to come away from that environment, which I felt at the time was very stressful. I continued to do supply, so I didn't leave teaching altogether. Absolutely love supply. I love the day-to-day. I love going to different schools, seeing different people. And I loved leaving the school when my marking was done and I left at 4:00. So that for me was still teaching. The stress was less. And I loved it. And I often had year 6, which I know would be some people's nightmare, but I absolutely loved year 6. So that suited me beautifully. In the meantime, I had my third child and I then decided I'd had a 3-year plan. So I knew I needed to get it going to start a business called Popcats Music Time, which was going to be my solo enterprise until I was 70 plus. It's music and movement for under 5s, nursery rhymes and all the familiar songs. And it's so much fun. So jumping around to Monkeys on the Bed, 5 Little Ducks, far cry from the year 6 work that I did. However, music had always been my passion. So I wrote this program with the areas of learning involved and it was still teaching without the stress. So that was my life. And I was still continuing to do supply 1 day a week. However, I then soon realised I could earn more money doing one class than I could doing a whole day of supply. So that wasn't a difficult decision. So I then left at the suitable time and I just did Popcats. So 10 years later, because that's how old the business is now, there are 21 teachers involved and it's a successful business where teachers are still teaching and some are still teaching in schools as well as alongside the business. So it's double the teaching. It's just how they choose to run their business and they're still dipping their toe into the classroom, which is really nice for them as well. And the schools get to keep them as well then, still teaching, but they're also running their business on other days. So that works really well. So that is my story in a nutshell of where my teaching was and how I've progressed into being a business owner of multiple franchisees.
Wow, that's amazing. Can I ask, when you say that your job became stressful, what changed to make you not enjoy it anymore?
Yeah, sorry. So for me, the first 8 years or so, I felt like I was left alone. I was in the classroom. We had our doors open, so it wasn't that I shut the door and closed myself off from the world, but there were less visits to my classroom, less scrutiny, as it felt to me. And I felt that I was left to get on with it, really. 1 year I had 37 year 6s with no TA. And that was probably my best result year, to be honest. I had a fantastic year. The rapport with the class was amazing. And we just had a great time. So that was a brilliant year. And then for me, probably 8 years in, maybe 7, things just started to change and I felt more pressure. That was a word that surrounded my day. More visits to the classroom, more book scrutiny, more visits from LA, SLT team. And that's how it felt like. There was constant noise, really. And then the noise was in my head and it was very difficult to switch it off when I got home. So it was constantly on this state of stress. And I was on the loo a lot because of this stress going on in my body. And then sleep's affected, mood's affected. I was very short at home and I'm 5'11", so definitely not short in height, but short in nature. And I'm not like that, definitely not now. I was quite snappy, can't think straight when I'm stressed. So everybody gets a very short version of me and it's all blurted out quickly, not really meaning it. But I think that it's like a thick haze where you can't really think straight. That was definitely me. And that was the knock-on effect of the constant scrutiny and of being in my teaching and learning space as a teacher.
Okay. Can I just ask about your comment, noise in your head?
Yes.
Can you describe what What do you mean?
I mean that all I could hear in my head was, it's not good enough, you're not doing enough, the children need to do more, you need to get them into this level, we're coming to watch you this day, here's the results of your observation. And I have to say, all my results of observation were outstanding. So for me, the pressure was on me. That wasn't necessarily somebody else giving me the pressure. That was me and my personality making myself feel that wasn't good enough. So the noise in my head was this constant imposter syndrome, you're not good enough, you shouldn't be here. But the results on paper said outstanding. So I think I'd been swollen, everything was swollen with stress. That really, was it there? Was it me doing it to myself? Really, now I look back. In fact, now I've had this conversation, I am realising that more than I think I've realised before. So yeah, I think that's the noise in my head. It was loud.
My goodness, that's so interesting, isn't it? Because the research says that when leaders go into classrooms and we give 2 positive things about the session and maybe 1 gentle piece of feedback, generally teachers don't hear the positives, they just take the negative. So you're saying even if it was outstanding what you were doing, you still were so actually stressed and your brain was so full that you couldn't hear that it was good enough because you just constantly felt that there was more to do.
No, and I think that's really sad, isn't it? It's really sad. And on reflection, and that's why these conversations are so important, on reflection, that was down to me, not necessarily down to the person delivering the news, because they were delivering brilliant news. That's my own head.
So we've got teachers and leaders listening to this who are in the job, they love it. I always loved my job. I never had that feeling of wanting to get out. Unfortunately, I burnt out, so I had to get out. I loved it. I was passionate about it. What would you be saying to staff now, that if you now looking back and looking from the outside, what would you be saying that they could do that would help them that you didn't know or didn't do?
So I think it's about knowing your individual members of staff and dealing with them in a way that works with them. Now, if somebody would have sat down with me in a calm way and said, look, I'm coming to see you on this day, and it's for this reason, then that would have helped me a lot. Instead of, I'm coming to see you on this day, and not giving me really an agenda, really a reason why. And for me and my own brain, because I overthink everything, it became quite personal, and it really wasn't. I think just a conversation instead of an email. We're coming to see you this day, 2:20 for your science lesson, blah, blah, blah. It just having the style of that individual. And I've done a course recently where the message was, treat others how they like to be treated rather than how you like to be treated. And I think if you can do that as a leader, which I now do with my team, because I know how they all work, and some will email and they just want an answer, and they don't want the fluffy, they just want an answer. Others will be like, hi, how are you? And we have a little conversation. But the ones who just need an answer right now, I answer them in their style that they like to be addressed and they like to speak to me in. And I think it's about knowing your team and how they like to be spoken to and have their communication given to them. So I think that would have helped me a lot.
I love that. Can you just describe to us how you feel now compared to how you felt in those last sort of 7 years? How are you now?
I now feel joyful. I feel alive. I feel like I've got time to go walk somewhere. I feel like I've got time to actually listen to my children, because my noisy head, I couldn't hear them. And all he used to say is, we'll do it later. We'll do it later. It's so sad, because now they are 13, 16 and 19. And I feel awful on my eldest one, who's now gone to uni, because I feel like the time when she was at her youngest was my most stressful. So it was always, we'll do it later, we'll do it later. And that just doesn't end up happening, because you're always too busy and the noise is too much. So now I have time, and I make sure my phone, which I have here, goes down, because when you run a business, yes, you have always got an agenda, but you're not beholden to anyone. So the phone is down, and I make sure that we sit around the table and I can look at them and talk to them, because teenagers, when do you actually talk to them unless you're actually sitting and eating? You don't see them. So it's all of those the things that matter in life, I feel like I've got time to see and notice.
So I'm just thinking, I guess what you're saying to everybody who's in teaching still and in that mad, intense rush of term time is, if you don't prioritize yourself, you're either going to stop loving it or you're going to burn out.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't make time for wellness, you've got to make time for illness. And who wants to have that choice of making time for illness? because illness will just stop you. So it's so essential that the wellness is prioritized. 100%.
Okay, so now you have time because you make time for wellness. What could you have done? Do you think you could have made the time when you were in the classroom?
Yes. Now that was, again, me really blowing things. For me, I think I blew them out of proportion and felt the pressure on me was from me, really. And I think it's so important as a teacher to have conversations and be honest and say, look, I need help here. I need you to know that I am struggling. You know, it's hard to say those words, isn't it? Especially if you're at the beginning of your career, to go in and say, I actually need some help as an ECT teacher. But I think a leader will respect you more for that than trying to pretend that you're okay and then you crash and you burn and then they're left with no staff. So conversations, time, wellness needs to be a priority more so than your 15 things on your list. That, you know, ask your colleagues for help. There'll be people who will be able to help you all over the school, because they will. And teachers are genuinely helpful people. That's why they do the job they do. I still now will help anybody. And it gives me joy to help people, because I just think, how would I feel if that was me drowning, which is how I'd really describe how I felt. And it's really sad. So be there for each other. Look out for that colleague who looks like they are running to the loo all the time, because that was me and no one really saw.
Yeah, and it's so important, isn't it? And the irony is that in helping someone else, it actually fills our energy tank and our emotional tank. So it's a win-win, really. But I guess what you're saying is that we need to just take a moment and almost think, am I okay? Am I looking after myself? Am I doing these things? And it's just a perfect time for me to show people my journal is just coming out, because this journal, it's 52 weeks journal it's called the Burnout Busting Teacher's Journal. It's very light and easy, but I gave it to a teacher to try recently, and she said after a week, she said, Ro, I haven't got the time to even open it to have a look in the morning or the evening, and then she said, that is so bad, isn't it? What is wrong with me? So then the next week she said, right, I'm going to make sure I do it just 30 seconds in the morning, 30 seconds in the evening. And she said things like gratitude prompts. She realized there's so many good things, even when she's overwhelmed. She looked at a top goal that she wanted to achieve that week or that day, and what she realized what was important for her, and whether she was looking after herself and her self-talk and all those things. Because it strikes me, Catherine, that you didn't stop to think about yourself at all.
No. And even down to really inhaling my food at lunchtime because I didn't have time, and not chewing my food properly. I had a lot of indigestion because it would literally be grab, go. And I saw that a lot. And I think you've got to prioritize chewing your food. It sounds really simple, but it's not happening, and it needs to happen. Chew your food and sit down. Walking around eating a sandwich. My daughter tells me in the school she's in, she sees the same teacher all the time. All she does is walk around with a yogurt. And that's her food. Walking around with a yogurt is not having your lunch properly. No. It's so sad. So sit down and actually look at what's going into your mouth and appreciate the flavors, because food is amazing, but if we're not even eating it properly, it might as well just be chalk.
No, absolutely. And actually, I listened to Dr. Michael Mosley on this, and he said, taking 10 minutes to eat your lunch, that's way too fast. You need to try and take 20 or 30 minutes. And I felt like shouting at the radio saying, hold on a minute, as teachers, we probably eat it in 3.5 minutes if we're lucky. And actually it shows the level of speed that we're trying to go through the day. But the research says that if we slow down, we speed up, because we become more productive. And
what we do, we sleep better, everything's better. I mean, now I've just been learning about circadian rhythm. Going out into the first light and looking at the sky for those first 5 minutes of the day help to reset your body, getting up at the same time every day. And I've got time to listen to podcasts now and to take those things in for my wellness. So even on your way to work, listening to a podcast as a teacher instead of music, or thinking about all the stresses of the day ahead, listen to a podcast, because the day isn't going to change because you're thinking about it on the way to work. So listening to a podcast like Dr. Chatterjee, the guests he has on and the people he speaks to, they are so important for your wellness. And he's all about wellness. He's so important. So that is a really that's what I do now. I listen to podcasts wherever I go because I just think they're brilliant.
Great. Well, Catherine, thank you so much for your time. If people want to see what you're doing with your groups, where would they find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn as Catherine Williams, and also I am on Facebook, Popcats Music Time HQ, and then also on Instagram. Sorry, I forgot the name of it then. On Instagram as well, and obviously on our website.
Lovely. Well, I'll put the links into the blurb for this podcast as well. So thank you for your time, Catherine. And it's really amazing to hear a little bit about the benefits that we can reap from really looking after ourselves. So I appreciate your time and your input, and good luck with everything you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure.
Thanks for listening. I hope you took something of value from today. If you want to connect, I'm at rowenahicks.com. or I have a Facebook group, which is Preventing Teacher Burnout. So I look forward to connecting to you at one of those.